So, hi everyone, welcome to the Finance Story Career Insight series, where we bring you industry experts to understand their journey, learnings, and discuss market trends. Today we have with us Jatin Mazarkar, who has been in finance for close to 20 years. And what is unique about his path is the bold moves he's made in his career. So, we could actually divide his career in two parts, where the first 13 years of his career, he's worked with large corporates like Nestle, PwC, GSK Consumer. And in 2016, after 5 years at GSK, he decided to venture into the startup space to lead the finance and legal function. So if I talk about the latter, the 8 years, he's worked with Goibibo, Volt, fast growing startups like Meesho, and now Fashinza, all in the capacity of a CFO. So from his career trajectory, and his decision, it's obvious that Jatin likes to challenge himself and be a part of startup journeys, during its most intense phase. That's the growth phase. So Jatin, thank you so much for joining in, and thanks a lot for the time.
Thanks, Chantel. Thanks for having me. It's
Thank
a
you
pleasure
so
to
much.
be here.
Yep. So Jatin, I know you're just done with the meeting, so thank you so much, for making the time and just being available. So Jatin, my first question to you is, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? From what I know, you were born and raised in Goa, okay, and you did your CA and eventually built your career. So would you want to highlight a little bit about yourself growing up and how was Jatin back then?
Sure. So, Chantel, I grew up in Goa in a middle-class family, and the obvious choice, for someone like me was to study and do well for myself. Uh, Back in the day, for anybody with a good academic record, the obvious choices, and especially, when you looked up to your seniors and other people around you who did well in academics, it was engineering and medicine. And, CA, MBA finance was not mainstream in a small place like Goa back then. Uh, but I had some, kind of personal influences. My dad was an aspiring CA. He couldn't complete his CA for some reason, and my uncle is a qualified cost accountant. He was heading finance for quite a few companies in Goa, and that was an inspiration for me. Dad in particular was had a very strong influence. So, and I was good with numbers, so I thought, let's give it a shot, and that's how I got into the finance function and chartered accountancy. um, yeah, and then one thing took me to another. I got good opportunities in large companies, and landed up in Gurgaon from Goa.
Amazing. So you did your articles, everything in Goa. So Goa was the
Yes,
base point till you moved out to find an opportunity in your career ahead.
absolutely, absolutely. I did my articleship with a mid-sized firm in Goa. Joined a family business, the Dempo Group of companies in Goa. Worked with them for about 2 years, and then I joined Nestle in their chocolate factory in Goa, which got me to Gurgaon actually, because Nestle's headquarters is in Gurgaon.
Okay.
Uh, if not, I never been to Gurgaon. I think I'd been just once to Delhi before that in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. So Jatin, okay, so how did you start your career? Like, what was your plan? Starting your career. Did you have a plan? Like, hey, you had these goals that you would want to be a CFO someday, work for a large company, or you had this entrepreneurial mindset as well, which actually transformed into you taking up startup opportunities few years into your career.
So entrepreneurship was definitely never on the cards. I think entrepreneurship has become more mainstream over the last 20, 10, 12 years, and we've been fortunate to see so many inspiring, entrepreneurs, founders, be it Flipkart, Meesho, and many of them, right, who have who are now inspiring the whole new generation to do bold things and create a lot of economic value. Back in the day, and I don't want to lie, entrepreneurship for someone like me was starting their own boutique CA firm in a place like Goa, and that definitely was not very exciting for me. So the intent was always to get a job, and kind of do well professionally in a private sector setup. Nestle was pretty much like a dream job for me back then. Nestle is a great name. I mean, I didn't even blink when I got the opportunity. I just grabbed it with both my hands, and I've had the good fortune of working with very, very talented folks at Nestle, and then many other companies in the same league. Um, but to your question, I didn't think back then that I would ever kind of be on the CFO path, because I came from a very from a very humble background, and I was starting at the as the lowest denominator in the organization. I was ambitious, I was hardworking, and I think I was fortunate to get good opportunities. But I don't want to lie, I never I kind of saw myself becoming the CFO in the in the 15 20 years, 15 20 years out from when I started.
That's amazing. So Jatin, the first 13 years, okay, it's an obvious career path. Most chartered accountants, join a PwC, then they join, the industry, and, they, work hard to climb up the corporate ladder, right? So in 2016, okay, you moved from the traditional corporate setup in like an MNC setup where you were really doing well, right? You were heading the FP&A and business partnering segment, from what I see. So how did Goibibo happen? Okay, I know it was more of a mature startup. It was not like a typical startup. It was more of a mature startup. So how did that switch happen in your mind that hey, I'll move to a tech based company? And what was the decision making process? So if somebody wants to make a decision like this, how do they decide?
So for me, one was, I think about 2012, 13, when, Flipkart started becoming more and more popular. It took me a while, but, slowly it kind of sunk in that, technology uh, can, have a very, very kind of exponential impact on the business, right? I think whether it's distribution, visibility, traditional businesses, I think the growth path of traditional businesses and tech businesses could be very, very different. So I mean that was one thing which was very exciting for me, and I was very keen on kind of jumping on the bandwagon. The other thing which for me, while I think when I started off my career, there were no entrepreneurial ambitions. Uh, I think one thing which I enjoyed, was working very closely with business teams, impacting business, and taking commercial decisions. And I, as I spoke to my friends who had kind of taken the plunge in the startup ecosystem, I realized that as a finance professional, the ability to impact business and work directly with decision makers, especially you are working very closely with the founder, unlike a very large multinational company where it's a very large setup, but I think your impact as such is kind of not as much as working with a young startup, fast growing startup. So those were two levers which were very exciting for me. In 2016, I couldn't differentiate between different stages of a startup, to be honest with you, right? It took me a while, and Ibibo was again a startup like any other startup for me. But when I joined them, they had a they were doing a GMV of close to 5,000 crores, very large company. I think in a good market cycle, a company which could possibly be worthy for an IPO. But yeah, something else happened there. They merged with Make My Trip, and that's when I kind of thought that this is not what I had joined the company for, and I chose to do something else. It was not an easy decision for me, because I have always been in my comfort zone for the first 15 years of my life. I worked with very large companies, established companies. I think metrics like runway and profitability were a given over there, right? I mean, no one ever bothered about those companies would have infinite runway.
Yep.
Uh, so
Yes.
so essentially, it was not very easy initially. There was a bit of nervousness, but I think as I got into the journey, I started enjoying it thoroughly, and I think all the feedback that I got about why a startup is exciting was validated very quickly, and I thoroughly enjoyed. There was no looking back from then.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So everybody who's watching, you can just type in your questions and we'll address every question on the go. So you could just ask any of your questions right now. Okay, so Jatin, the immediate the question that I have is, and which a lot of people also ask me because we also have a recruitment firm, right, for mid-level professionals to an extent. So a lot of folks, want to understand that how did you discover GoIBO, if you're okay to share, right? How do you discover such roles? And the second one is, how do you validate yourself that hey, you know what, I've not been a CFO in the past, and this is my first stint as a CFO, coming from a large organization, right, where everything is so process oriented, right? So how did what was the interview process like, and if you could highlight a little bit on those aspects.
So one, I think the first question uh, I mean, the role was introduced to me by a search firm, a very large search firm, and I think I keep having this conversation with a lot of search firms when they, come to me for references. Can you refer someone for this role? And when I refer my colleagues from, FMCG consumer, the feedback that I get is they have not worked in a startup, but my view is there's always a first time, right? I mean, startups are not mainstream, or technology companies, consumer technology companies are not mainstream. SaaS companies are not mainstream. There are a handful of companies in India about 10 years back. But if you give, if it's the right opportunity to the right person, someone who's willing to learn, and someone who understands basics, I think it's a good fit in my view. For aspiring, finance professionals who are looking to get into the startup ecosystem, there could be various ways. I mean, if you're, I think everybody would not start as a CFO, right? And I think for the slightly younger folks, it would be meaningful to engage with people who have been in the finance functions in startup ecosystem for 5, 7, 10 years. There are a lot of people now. You could even find a mentor who's been in the space. He could, if not the company that he's currently working for, he could kind of introduce you to someone else, given his network. And I think today the startup ecosystem is very different from what it was about 7 or 10 years back. It is mainstream. I think if I look at Meesho, which for me by far has been the richest experience, and I'm super grateful to have got that opportunity. I think it has had a huge impact on my career, and my professional life. I've seen the brightest of folks there, who've left, who kind of are from India's best colleges, from best consulting firms, from the tier one consulting firms, who left those jobs and come to Meesho, because that's the kind of impact you can create, right? I mean, in a company with the right capital, resources, very strong founders with a good mindset. Um, yeah, so I think to your second question, the levers and the opportunities to get into a startup are much more today than what they were. There's more liquidity, there's more capital chasing high quality startups. There are more high quality aspiring founders, because I think they have a lot of good people to look up to now, and learn from journeys of other founders who've been there, done that. And obviously then it also creates more opportunities for finance folks.
Yep, absolutely. So Jatin, I mean, okay, Goibibo happened, right? And fast forward, a couple of years, Meesho happened in 2018. I guess two years later, right? Now Meesho had a totally different story. It was a fast-growing startup, and I think you joined them during their Series C and were with them for 3 years until Series F, where you guys raised a lot of money. Meesho, got really, really big, right? And all with marquee investors. Okay, so again, my question is about how did you discover Meesho, and what is a vetting process when they vet that, hey, Jatin is a right person for this, to be a CFO, and how big was the finance team, and what was the responsibilities, if you could just take us through it all.
Sure. So Meesho happened to me through one of their investors. I happened to connect with one of their investors, and they of course put me to the founders. And then I think I've had the maximum number of interviews in Meesho. I met close to 12 people. The entire leadership team, multiple investors, investor CFOs. So it was that's how I kind of landed up in Meesho. And I mean, I think the moment I met with it, I had made up my mind that I'll do anything to work with this guy. He's creating something big. uh, what he was looking for, possibly what he was looking, see, I think someone at my level, finance fundamentals are a given, right? I mean, you wouldn't have I would not like see too many people trying to kind of evaluate you on your basics of finance. I mean, that's pretty obvious. There are two things which I think, a few things rather, I'll not say two things. One, of course, is you have to have a very different mindset, right? Very entrepreneurial mindset. It's not going to be like a Fortune 500 public company where you have everyone in place. I mean, if the company is growing fast and some positions are left vacant, as a CFO, you're not you're supposed to make sure that stuff is done. Let's say you are kind of joining a company which is like doing $1 billion of turnover. Everyone in the CFO's office, all the positions, would be there. It's almost like it's like a brownfield project versus joining a startup like Meesho. At this time I joined them, right back then, about 5 years back, it was like a greenfield project. It was like, you've bought the land and you need to start the factory now. I need to do civil work, set up machinery, and all of that. And what I mean by that is there were two people in finance, or maybe three people in finance when I joined Meesho. And when I left, we were about 60 people in finance and legal. I think our order scale had gone up 100x between in those 3 years. We saw, I think, the most successful, venture capitalists coming on board, Prosus, SoftBank, and a public market investor like Fidelity. That's huge testament to the quality of the business that was being built. It was not just scale; it was meaningful scale, sustainable business. My sense is, Vidit would have, or Vidit or the board members or the investors would have looked at someone who would have, kind of got into that kind of a culture, someone who is not getting like a running finance function, someone who can build a team grounds up, uh, you know, be a sounding board to the founders, understand what how a technology company is different from a regular, let's say, consumer company like CPG, right? And yeah, I mean, possibly it worked out from both sides, basis those levers.
Amazing. Jatin, I'll just dig in a little bit into the hiring process. Okay. So,
Sure.
so my question is, because we've never interviewed a CFO asking, like, tell us what is your interview process. It's always the other way around. Right? We give everyone tips like, hey, if you're meeting a CFO, these are the processes to be followed. So, if you could just highlight what was the, interview process. You said 12 rounds, and how long does it take entirely? Who do you meet, and how do you prep for it? Like, I know it's not on the technical side, but what's the prep that goes into it?
So I think all the conversations with the leadership team, right? My peers at Meesho was more about culture fitment. They wanted someone. I think when you're a very very young team, and I was like pretty much the oldest. I was the oldest person in the team, possibly 10 years older than the average leadership team member in terms of age. Leave aside the average company's age. So there was this sudden kind of hire coming in with gray hair, and so it does kind of require a lot of scrutiny from a cultural compatibility standpoint, right? So they wanted someone whom like, let's say, I'm talking to a category head, a business head who drives revenue and growth, right? What he looks from someone like me is, whether when he comes to me with a problem, can I really solve it, or I give him like a process which applies to a 5,000 crore or $1 billion company, which has 50 people in finance, and which is a public company. I have to contextualize the company's given its current stage, and how can we kind of set up processes which are relevant to a company of this stage and this scale and this maturity. So, and that is also, I would call it cultural fitment, because if you come with your kind of strict lens of controllership, which most started accountants are kind of trained in, right? Then I think it becomes a little difficult to find compatibility with the business teams and the finance team. You also have to kind of give them solutions which are workable for that stage of the company. So cultural fitment was, I think, a big kind of thing that the founders and the leadership team would have looked at. The other thing they would have looked at is the my understanding of technology, right, and consumer technology in particular. I mean, what are the key metrics that would be measured for a consumer company? Things like CAC, LTV. I mean, these things are like super important. Maybe not so relevant in traditional businesses, but if you're in a business like this, you really need to understand the shape of the P&L and how these metrics are important to drive profitability and measure success of a product for market fit, as they call, as they term as they use the term in this kind of a business. So I think those are the things one should look at. And I mean, as a company keeps growing, right? The kind of person that startup also look for are a bit different. So maybe as a company is closer to an IPO, the persona that the company is looking for would be very very different from a an early stage company. There are many consumer businesses, tech businesses, which their outcomes can be like in the range of 50 $100 billion, and we've seen that globally. And I think if you look at Amazon and Google, they're upwards of $1 trillion today. You possibly need someone like an investment banker who can raise capital at a very very different scale from a very strong operating finance CFO. So one has to be prepared for that also. It really depends on what journey the company is at, and I mean, what are the key aspects of finance that the business requires. For example, if you look at a B2B business, it's very important to have very strong controls, compliances, underwriting processes, unlike a consumer platform business.
Amazing. And Jatin, what was your prep when you had all these rounds of meetings? Like, were you also preparing on the background, like understanding what's happening? Was it like a lengthy, lot of preparation? If you could just dive into that.
I somehow believe that you can't I like to read a lot. I generally, whenever I have free time, I generally read up about stuff. And when I say read, I'm not talking about fiction or novels. I mean, I try and spend some time on that also. But generally, what's happening on the
Yep.
technology side, as far as and what's relevant to me as a CFO of a tech business. So, I mean, some of those basic concepts were something that I always had. Now, I don't know if you can, like start preparing one day before the interview and kind of create magic over there, right? I think different people enjoy different roles. I mean, I know of CFOs who love to do a consumer platform CFO role, but they would not enjoy doing a, let's say, a B2B finance role. I mean, CFO of a B2B platform, and vice versa, because what you're measured on is very very different, right? I think. And what you're expected to do in your 10-hour kind of uh, journey at work is very very different in these two companies. So I think many of these things, are there with you, right? I personally don't believe that you have to like start preparing in the last minute. Maybe one good thing which I would recommend to candidates is just like read up about the founders, understand their vision about the business. Because if you the last thing you want to do is go into an interview and you don't even know what business the company is. And why I say this is because some of these tech businesses are very unique. You need to know specifically what business they are in. And when you listen to like every interview I've gone to, I've made it a point to listen to the founders YouTube interviews, videos. Basically, you get to know how he thinks about the business, what kind of things matter to him, what are his aspirations for the business, and whether it fits into your scheme of things as well.
Okay. Okay,
So I
that's
would
amazing.
call that my preparation. Yeah, if that was what you meant.
Okay, that's great. Cool.
Yeah.
So, Jatin, how is it? I'm sure there would be a lot of things that you would have learned, like lot of things that you would have learned and executed for the first time, right? So, was there a sense of like, hey, nervousness because right now, okay, you're the CFO, it's a big term, it's a big designation. So, how did you navigate, through, all of those things, learning things by yourself? Like, you would have to learn on the go.
Yeah, certainly. I think there were. I mean, if you talk of fundraise, right? I had never done it ever. The best. I mean, the best fundraise I would have done at best is kind of go and speak to a bank to raise debt. But and that was way back when I was with the Dempo Group. In 2002, three, almost 20, 21 years back. Uh, if you look at any consumer company, they typically operate at a 14-15% PAT, and sitting on like a very very rich cash balances. So none of them need to really raise equity for their expansion. So that was I mean the first for me. My good fortune was that I had someone like Vidit, who was the founder of Meesho, to learn from. He took me along to quite a few fundraise conversations, and I understood what are the aspects that investors look at, and I mean how to tell the story in the right articulate manner. So and then of course he gave me the opportunity to kind of pitch Meesho to very very large investors like Fidelity, etc. in Hong Kong. I've traveled to Hong Kong twice, and pitched Meesho to very very large investors. And then I think when you do it once or twice, right, you just kind of get into the groove, and you start enjoying it. So I think, yeah, I mean, I've been lucky also that I was in the right place with the right people, and that helped me in this journey.
Okay, so there's a lot of learning on the go. There's a lot of learning on the go, and the organization understood that, but they saw the value that you're really going to bring in, and then it was learning on the go, and
For
that's
sure.
how.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I know these conversations can go on forever, but I know we've got another 15 minutes. Okay. So Jatin, my point is, how did you so what are your five challenges in this journey? Like the biggest challenges where you said, oh my God, this is a real pain. And the five learnings. Or you could say, the stuff that you're really, really proud of or in your journey of 3 years with Misho.
Sure. So I think I don't know if I can call out five specifically, but maybe I'll just be very.
Whatever.
I'll just tell you what I have on top of my mind.
Yeah.
So the five challenges. One is, you need to keep reinventing yourself in this role. It's especially for companies which are growing fast, right? I mean, let's say today you start hiring for a position that you need today. I mean, you're kind of set up for failure. You need to have the ability to anticipate how the company is growing, how the business is evolving, and what kind of positions you'll need, roles you'll need. And very important to also have the ability to influence your founders and other key stakeholders, that you need resources in terms of team, etc. Now, why I especially talk about team building is, if you go back 5 years in time, Misho was a relatively unknown name, right? Today it is
Yeah.
it's a very, very large commerce platform in India,
Yeah.
possibly the largest in terms of orders, number of orders, maybe not in terms of value, because Misho is championing the cause of small entrepreneurs who sell unbranded goods. But to think of it, back then, for me to go and attract the top talent in the market and tell them what Misho is all about, it was not the easiest of tasks, right? I had to. It took me some bit of effort, but I think it's also, what you call a flywheel, right? You attract two good guys, then those good guys also kind of spread a good word, and the team keeps expanding. You attract really good talent, and many of those guys are still around. They're doing extremely well. They've risen up the ranks in Misho, uh, right? So one is that, I think, the ability to hire the right people and hire people uh, in sync with the company's requirements. Think about a billion-dollar public company, right? Let's say the finance in the team is supposed to have 50 people. Those 50 people will be there. But
Yeah.
when you join a small company, you're supposed to spend disproportionate time in being like a ambassador for the company, and telling people why this can be a huge career opportunity for you. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing. Kind of having the right team resources to do justice to the rules and to the role that you have at hand. The other challenge that I would say is setting up processes, right? I mean, you have to realize that there are different asset classes in the investment ecosystem, right? I think the public markets as an asset class is very different from venture capital. Public markets want stability, they want predictability, they want earnings to grow at a certain pace with a lot of predictability. Venture capital works on the power law. They want 5% of their portfolio to create disproportionate impact, be disruptive in the market, do bold things. But for a finance partner, for a CFO to partner a company like that is not easy, because if you have to grow at that pace exponentially, things break, right? And things break. You need to kind of uh, partner business teams, founders, the board, and make sure that while things break, uh, the things which matter are not broken as
Yeah.
much, right? If you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
So um, uh, this is a I mean classically, if you look at the CFO's role, he's like the moral compass of the company. He's a strong kind of proponent of controls, compliance. But if you talk to an early stage company which is like doubling, tripling every year in terms of size and growth and number of orders, if you do everything in a fashion which is supposed to be relevant to a very large public company, then I don't think you're the right CFO for that company,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You have to contextualize. You have to see how you can, uh, how you can kind of drive governance without, kind of being very uh, uh,
Interrupting the growth and
disrupting growth, or yeah, exactly, interrupting growth. Correct. Uh, yeah. So challenges, and of course, then we've seen very, very challenging times. Like one event I can talk of was COVID, where almost for 2 months we had no business whatsoever. There was so much stress in the team, so there was stress with everybody, right? Pretty much all across the organization, on how the business is going to do, whether we'll survive or not. So I- and that becomes more relevant to a startup which is not making profits. Now, you talk of a consumer company, or any very large company which has been around for some time, which is sitting on large cash reserves, which has been profitable for years together. They can survive for 2 months without revenues, right? They would never let go of people, etc. So that's another thing where this I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but this is not a journey for the weak-hearted, right? You have to be able to take such events in your stride. God forbid, I hope those events do not happen again. But if they do, you need to take that in your stride.
Wow.
So yeah, I think those were some of the key learnings, key challenges rather. The key learnings for me were things which I did for the first time, like build a team grounds up. Absolutely, had never done that. Like I told you, Ibibo. When I joined them, it was a startup, but I had a 35-member team. They were doing 5,000 crores of GMV, so and fairly evolved processes, Big Four stat auditor, and all of that. So you know uh, the ability to kind of start from the scratch, from a clean slate, and scale up was a huge learning for me. uh, I think one thing which I enjoyed a lot, which I enjoy a lot in this journey, is the ability to raise capital from really good investors, and for the right reasons, right? I think a lot of not just because there's a lot of liquidity in the market, etc. They're purely on business fundamentals. um, that's been a great learning for me. I think this whole journey has also kind of made me a more resilient person. I've seen so many ups and downs in this period, uh, that just kind of it's not like a linear journey that you see in a very large company which is growing steadily, right? Which is profitable, etc. This kind of journey can have a lot of ups and downs.
Yep.
So it makes you stronger in that sense. And
Amazing.
yeah, and I think the last thing I would say is, I've seen a lot of people who came on board as operators, be it finance or be it business or marketing, growth, whichever function you are. But when you see businesses getting created so up close, right? You sometimes also end up getting conviction that maybe I should try my hand at entrepreneurship. I'm not saying that I'm going to do it, but I think this is like the best way to learn entrepreneurship ever. I mean, you're seeing it happening live, up close, working with some really bright people. Uh, you know, there can't be a better way to teach business and entrepreneurship to potential candidates.
That's yeah. A lot of CFOs in the last 2 to 3 years have started their own. I mean, I
Yeah.
see a lot of them. Yeah, yeah. Cool. This is so exciting, Jatin. So, what is the day? What was a day in your life like? Like when I imagine the growth at 100, 100x. I imagine your team growing from 1 to 60. $1 billion raised. Okay, so like, what's your day like? How does it? How does it work? What's it like?
So I think, I mean, if I look at the classical CFO's office, right? There's a controller, there's a business finance guy, there's legal also, which pretty much is part of the CFO's office in most startups. There could be taxation, internal audit. I mean, each of these, for me, number one is, each of these functions would have their kind of deliverables at a regular cadence, right? Could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it is. The idea is to keep spending time with them without micromanaging, and catching up with them at those regular intervals to make sure everything is in place. If everything is BAU, if something breaks, then obviously you need to have unplanned meetings. Then, of course, I personally like to spend a lot of time with business, get into business reviews, understand what are the challenges of business, and how do they affect me as finance, as a finance leader. If I could be of help to them and solve it, through my team and my office in some way. Yeah, I think those that's how I've operated. I also like to read, understand what's happening in the ecosystem, and see how's that relevant to me as a CFO of a particular business, and see if I can pick up some learnings from there.
Okay,
So
that's
yeah, that's how I like to spend my time at work.
and when you say you have to keep reinventing yourself. So when you say keep reinventing means you got to have an open mind, keep reading, keep adjusting. You can't have this stuck mind because
Yeah,
everything is done for the first time. Sometimes like just for the first time overall.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are times when I've had to, like for example, Meesho had huge social impact. Right? We were empowering small entrepreneurs. Um, from even a small northeastern state would have like 4% kind of value contribution to our business. Now someone had to go and tell this to regulators. So public policy, which is something which is typically not in the domain of a finance professional CFO, is something I had to pick up as part of my role, because it was very important, for people in a in the right positions in government offices to know what value Meesho is creating for them.
Yep.
And it could be Meesho, could be Fashinza. For example, at Fashinza, we empower small entrepreneurs who are into apparel manufacturing, get connected to apparel brands, whether in US, Europe, Middle East, sitting out of small places like Tirupur, etc. We deploy our, software in their factories, which gives visibility to um, apparel brands on how how the apparel is being manufactured, the various stages it is at. So this is not something which everybody sitting in, let's say, in the textile industry would know, but it is important to go and articulate this correctly so that they know that there's someone like Fashinda who's creating this value in the ecosystem, who's adding that kind of value to small entrepreneurs, which I think is the backbone of India's economy. So when I
Amazing.
say reinventing, what I mean is this is not classically a part of CFO's office, right? But sometimes you need to kind of step out of your comfort zone and do that.
That's very much needed.
Yeah.
There's no boundaries.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So Jatin, like how? Okay. So moving on from Meesho. Okay. So how did, I'm sure Meesho would have like shaped you, groomed you to another level. So how did Fashinza happen? Okay. And if you could talk about your journey so far with them and what's happening.
Fashions again, I was introduced by another investor. Coincidentally, the Fashions are founders and Meesho founders are kind of batchmates in college, and we have
Okay.
many common board members also. So that's how I got introduced to Fashinza. It's been a little over a year now. This is a B2B platform which connects apparel brands with apparel manufacturers. And I think, yeah, we've been going great guns since I've joined. The business is in good shape. And yeah, it's been a good journey so far for me.
Amazing. So, after like this 3 years of power run with Meesho, you again took on startups, which,
Yeah,
had a lot of investment in, had a lot of pressure, had a lot of challenges that had to be overcome, right? So, I think you're game for, to grow in this segment, right? You're kind of addicted to this part. The value also you bring in is great, of course. So,
I would like to believe so. And yeah, I think it's pretty much like the Hotel California song, right? You can check out, but you can never leave because once you get used to this thrill,
yep.
I would say it's rather difficult to go back to the regular stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's amazing. So, Jatin, I have, two questions to conclude. What would you tell folks, who want to join startups and who are, say, working in a PwC and they really are keen to be a part of fast growing startups because people now are so willing to take the risk and move on. I mean, since the last 3 to 4 years, right? It's been everyone is chasing startups. So what would you tell them? Okay, how can you bring in the mindset shift? If like after being a traditional finance guy and looking at numbers in a particular way, how do you bring that shift? Is it innate? Is it an innate quality that you had, or it's something that you understood? You put yourself in the kind of business that you are in and the ecosystem, and you kind of adjust it to that.
Yeah, so see, I think it really depends on what stage of your career you're in, right? I think, like if someone from Big Four typically is trying to enter a startup, more often now it's going to be a controllership role because I'm presuming you, or let's say someone from Big Four from the tax function is, kind of wanting to join a startup, it would be a taxation role in the startup. So, and today, I mean, I see Big Fours, kind of investing a lot of time in startups as a as a sector for their business because this is the sector which is going to grow, which is going to give them incremental revenues, and many of these startups are going to go public. They could be very large outcomes in terms of clientele revenue, etc. So I think people in the Big Four ecosystem, young chartered accountants are in any case exposed to startups. They know culturally how every startup that I work for has been audited by a Big Four. So I mean, I don't. They basically know how startups operate. They audit startups. I think for them it's important to figure out which role they want to do, where they want to start, and most importantly, learn about the business because they should know what the business is about. Then I think when you appreciate it, you fit in better into the system. Right, you're able to partner well with business teams, work well with them. Uh,
Okay. And
but yeah,
yeah, sorry, you were adding
So
something.
essentially, there are plenty of opportunities. I don't think there's a dearth of opportunities for people in Big Four or traditional or non-startups. I don't know if traditional is the right word to kind of take up roles in startups.
But you have to be a cultural fit, and you need to have the bent, the mindset
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
right, right, right.
Okay, cool. So any message to those watching and reading later on, like what would you tell them as a closing message, especially with so many layoffs happening and all of those aspects. So how do they decide which startup, how do they decide, like, or there's no definite path. There is a considerable amount of risk involved when you make such decisions.
Yeah. See, I think the layoffs that you see today, and by the way, layoffs are happening even in the top three tech firms. And I don't want to take names, but the top three,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, tech firms globally, right? It's just that it's just the markets cycles that we saw in 2021, where there was plenty of liquidity. People had raised a lot of capital, expecting a very different level of growth, etc. But I think there has been some bit of evening out that has happened after 2021 November, right? The markets have cooled off a bit, and obviously, then you need to right size. I know it is emotionally draining for someone who's kind of lost his or her job, but reality is, when you're a commercial enterprise, you have to kind of make sure you need to make sure that the economics work, right? While there have been layoffs, I think there have been some incredible success stories. There are at least four or five Indian startups who have gone public and doing extremely well, right? I mean, I take a lot of pride that Meesho has turned profitable last quarter, and I'm sure this is going to be, it's just begun, right? The best is yet to come. So one, of course, is make sure that you are joining the right company. Try to understand their business model, understand the economics, get conviction that this is a large outcome, and this will turn profitable eventually. Because you can't survive on venture capital all your life. Venture capital comes with an 8 years with a typically with an 8 year cycle. Capital has to be returned back to the investors, the LPs. So at some stage, the company has to kind of start sustaining and becoming profitable. And I think
amazing.
finance guys should be able to kind of see that, right? Read that if they understand the business model well.
Amazing. Jatin, there's this, a lot of people, want to get into FP&A, right? But they don't understand the controllership side of the business. So what would you tell people, who are starting their career, right? Or, like just 2 to 3 years into their career, how do they, if they aim at a CFO role in future, so how do they bring that balance between, FP&A and controllership? Like, you've done it really well. So you have
Yeah,
any
so
thoughts on
I
that?
think, I believe that there are specialist functions like tax, internal audit, etc. But if you talk about a classical CFO, it's very important for him to have a good mix of controllership and FP&A stroke business finance. Because if you're only done one thing, then uh, you would struggle with, let's say, if a person is kind of over indexed on controllership, he would be excellent in setting up processes and uh, you know uh, accounting policies and all of that. But when it comes to being a business enabler, uh, there would be some bit of kind of friction, because you then only think in a particular manner, right? And likewise, I think if you are over indexed on business finance, while of course you can have a very strong control on board, but you are not able to at times appreciate some of the challenges that the controller faces, because the controller has to get stat audit done, IFC done, internal audit done. And I think if you don't tick the boxes on some of these things, it reflects very poorly on your business. So it's very important to kind of get a good a mix of both these aspects. A very good understanding of tax is also important, right? I mean, you don't have to be a tax expert, but uh, the basics, the fundamentals of tax are also important, because tax is a very powerful function when it comes to structuring and creating a lot of economic impact, a large impact. I can tell you from my journey that there has been one event where I've actually kind of skipped a promotion because I wanted to do a particular role, and then my boss was so happy with me that he's gone around telling everybody that this is how people should plan for their career, because Jatin was clear that what he wants to do. He's given up his promotion. He's okay to get it next year, but this is the role that he wanted to do. And I would strongly recommend youngsters to look for experience and good people to work with, from whom you can learn, the getting the right kind of functional experience, rather than chasing kind of monetary success or promotion early on in their career. That will come through. No one is going to take that away from you.
Wow, that's a great advice, right? It's an amazing advice. So if you just focus on what you want and you give your best to it, I mean, you will reach somewhere, credible. It will happen.
Right.
It's a matter of time. Cool. So Jatin, okay, any if you have to go back and rewind one thing, like change one thing, what would you do? Or any you felt wish I knew this before, maybe I would have taken a better decision. Anything?
Nothing really, Chantal. I think there are God has been very kind. I've got the best of opportunities. Got been lucky to work with the best of people. I don't want to sound ungrateful, by saying that I wish this had happened differently, because I think there are most of the things that have happened to me have, I've enjoyed and I've learned a lot and have had a huge impact on my career.
Yes. Cool. So Jatin, I mean, thank you so much. This was more about understanding, how could one get into a CFO role and, what's the hiring process like, because that's the question we get asked most often. But we're
Yeah,
also doing another panel series with CFOs to understand, the nitty-gritties of the functionalities, how does it really work, etc. So I'll definitely invite you for that. And like really thanks for the time. You've been amazing. Like since we connected. Thanks a lot.
my pleasure, Chantal. It was lovely talking to you and your audience today.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Jatin. Thank you everyone for joining in. Take care. Thank
Thank
you. See you. Bye.
you. Bye.
See you.